Hey there, Exiles. Hope your Sentinel League is going good. And I don't have to ask about the Arch Nemesis mods because, yeah, we know what those are like. But anyway, yeah, fun times. Good league otherwise, so I love Sentinel stuff. Anyway, we're about a week into the league, and I'd just like to give you all an update of what I've been working on. Of course, I'm playing the same build as last league with the Golem Bomber build, so if you're interested in how that works, then please check out my original video on it, which I will link below. Today I'm going to be showcasing the same build, but with some tweaks I've made, what I'm working to get for the build, and explain some of the new info regarding how the build functions that I've learned. I'm a bit scatterbrained when it comes to this sort of stuff, so please bear with me. I mean, there's just way too much info in PoE. I'm not going to cover everything about the build in this video since I've technically already done a build video for this, and I'm not done with it this league, so I'll do one later. But this video is just going to document the league so far, and then again, what I've changed and what I've learned. And since I'm still very much a casual PoE player, I may have some understandings wrong, like for sure. But feel free to correct me and help me learn. And if you don't want to listen to me ramble, just mute the stuff and you can watch the build showcase. So through the introduction, I have shown some Sirius and Conquerors and Guardians and such, and as you can see, the build still does function very well here in 3.18, even with the new Arch Nemesis mods. But the build is still far from done. I'm still on a tight budget as a casual with like 3x to my name, which is, you know, almost covered the entire build last league, but even so, I'm sitting at about 12 million DPS with pretty decent but imperfect defenses, you know, around 4 to 4.2k HP with some energy shield, crit immunity, 80 all res, positive chaos resistance, the little Ellie bubble, molten shell, 25-30k armor unbuffed without flasks, you know, 600 HP regen a second with the golems, you know, max block but glancing blows, which I need to fix. But yeah, I don't know what changed, but like everything about this build became extremely expensive this league. And I didn't really expect that, besides obviously the Ashes of Stars and the Aegis Aurora like being just ridiculously overpriced because they're overpowered. So getting this build up and running was extremely rough the first few days of the league. Primordial Mites were like 90 chaos, and Mob Mischief was also like 90 chaos, and Barracks of Spite was like 50 chaos. Thankfully after like the first 3 days they all dropped down pretty considerably, but I did end up buying Primordial Mites at like 80 chaos a piece, so yeah, don't do that. Though I think they're like 30 chaos now. But anyway, I just want to say that the league starting, while this works on paper and I did league start it, it's not the best idea. I spent basically every last scour and regret I could respecking a few times to adjust to the new Arch Nemesis modifiers, and struggled to get currency as my build was only half working as like a Detonate Dead Ignite Elementalist. And of course the new Arch Nemesis modifiers were granting huge amounts of HP and fire resistance, which just make the Ignite playthrough a huge pain to level with. So in my original post on the PoE forums, I did mention that this was a fine league starter because it was really cheap, and technically I guess that's true because I did league start this, but I almost wouldn't recommend that to anyone anymore with these new Arch Nemesis modifiers. I did level as Fireball and then swap to Detonate Dead since the Spectre corpses were still bugged, and while that's fine for the most part, I do expect that to get changed, especially in 3.19. And when it does, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do for league starting next time. The new Arch Nemesis modifiers have some insane fire resistance and other annoying things that make just leveling with fire ignites very, very painful. And of course, you know, a lot of this gear for this build is very, you know, endgame map required. So for the first couple days, it's going to be extremely hard to get, especially the primordial jewels, which, I mean, no one's really going to have access to those for a while. Anyway, the build right now has been doing great after these first few struggling days. I'm comfortably mapping T16s and doing, you know, full bosses, conquerors, buffing everything with sentinels and all that stuff. It's definitely a lot harder, but we're getting by. I do feel like some of the new modifiers, especially the ground effects and on-death effects and crazy shit following you around the screen, is getting me killed way more than before. So I'm using the brass dome now instead of a Skin of the Lords because I'd found it, luckily. And since it basically gives you crit immunity and 5 all max res, it's incredibly good defenses. I'm still working on getting an Aegis Aurora since it's basically required when you're using glancing blows, but outside of that I'm not too sure how much more defensively I can get. Even spell suppression armor is great on paper but would kill my resistances, so I'm not really sure. Maybe I can go Purity of Elements later on when I get Ashes of Stars, but I mean, okay, I'm poor enough, there's no way I'm going to be able to afford that ever. Speaking of though, this league actually has been really good for like solo self-out and people like myself who hate trading. Creating items with the recombobulators have been outstanding. I managed to make my own +2 wand and a really solid Stygian Vice. And these boots and gloves as well, just to cover all my life and resistances I need. Like, I haven't really needed to buy much besides like obviously some of the primordial jewels, the Mob Mischief, the Enlighten, and the Empower. Pretty much everything else though I've handcrafted. While there are much better builds out here, and ones that are probably cheaper and easier to play, I have grown quite attached to the Golem Bomber build. Like, I feel like I can actually take this build much further, but obviously it's never going to feel as good as one button builds or omniscient stackers or skeleton mages and all that stuff. So sometimes I feel like I'm just kind of wasting my time with this build, especially now when I'm at the last steps and needing, the big ticket items to survive the harder content. I don't know, I like this build, but I feel like I'm struggling more than I should. But again, though, obviously the build works, and of course there's a couple people playing golems now, which is cool since I hate skeleton mages in Absolution, and there aren't very many good minion builds this time around. But playing this 2 leagues in a row now, I have gotten a much better understanding of how this build functions, and I do want to talk about it a little bit. Again, if you're not interested in, the path of building, the planning, optimizing, all that stuff, just keep muting and enjoy the map clears, I guess. But for everyone else, I just want to talk about how the build functions because I need to update that anyway. So first off, I did finally figure out how to calculate the DPS and path of building with this. You can calculate 19% of your golem's HP and then input it here to the corpse HP and then see that your damage calc for Death Wish will be the base damage, which is that 19% plus the spell's base. So yeah, I'm glad to see that that works. It's just kind of convoluted, but at least now you can actually see the damage, and I can see that I have 12 to 18 million DPS depending on how many minions I explode. Next is that people have asked me why I use skeletons, and I did mention this before in the previous video, but I feel like people should understand it. But it's literally free damage. Death Wish scales the ailment damage based on the number of minions targeted. So you can drop skeletons on a boss before it's targetable, and then grab 12 minions, with your golems and skeletons, and explode for some seriously fat damage. This is also why I run Herald of Purity, because I know they're not anywhere near as good for detonation as golems, but they do allow me to target more minions at once, which help me, do bigger damage to harder bosses. The other question people ask me all the time is, what is the difference between Fire Ignite and Chaos Conversion with the Black Flame? And to be honest, they're gonna do about the same damage regardless. The only reason why I still run Chaos is because I don't like Arcanist Brand to do Flame Surge and Flammability. I'd rather just have Withering Step on mouse hold, so it's just kind of automated. Plus our Withers are never going to fall off due to Ignite, so that's kind of cool. But honestly, they're going to be about the same either way. I also like Chaos because it does feel better for mapping, as many of the mobs now have high fire res due to all these new Arch Nemesis modifiers. But if you're struggling to get stats or resistances, you can just run a normal ring and Barracks Respite, and that'll help cover everything, and you can just play fire, it's fine. Another thing regarding the scaling that I need to talk about is deciding between scaling minion level and life versus dot multi. And that's a bit more tough because I've been playing around with the calculations a lot, comparing, one minion level versus, checking the HP loss and then plugging that in and then seeing how much dot multi would need to fill it. And after doing a bunch of testing, it's probably better to scale minion level where you can, but obviously dot multi is still very strong. Basically, I was comparing a +1 wand with 45% dot multi with crafts versus a +2 wand, and they ended up to be about the same damage with the rest of the minion and life nodes that I have. I was also trying to move the passive tree around to see if I could take more dot multi nodes and get rid of some minion life and see if that would be better. And to be honest, it pretty much evens about the same, because the higher levels you get, the more those HP modifiers really matter for your golems, and then obviously the more dot multi you have is the bigger your ignites are going to be, and with the bigger base we have bigger ignites, and it's just, it's a give and take one way or the other. So the only info gained about testing all this information was that just get your damage where you can. Dot multi is easier to get than gem levels for sure, but gem levels are definitely going to be worth a lot more later on. And scaling the base level does make your minion life nodes that much more valuable. So ultimately, if you don't have a +2 wand, that's fine. Get a +1 with some dot multi, go for it. And then also if you don't have a +1 amulet, you can get dot multi amulets, stuff like that. Everything's good. And then the last thing I want to talk about is shock, because shock is insanely good, which is why we go on the Ascendancy and grab all damage can shock. Since we can shock with our Ignites, we also have Thread of Hope grabbing Breath of Lightning on this northern part of the tree. And you might think that that's, not really required, but 50% more shock ailment is insane. I can reasonably get 50% shocks on Shaper and Cirrus. It's not a problem at all. And that's a shit ton of damage. That's a 50% more damage multiplier. It's insane. If you take off the Breath of Lightning, I think I'm only getting around 37% shocks. So yeah, it's a huge node to pick up. I mean, I would love to be able to grab Heart of Destruction too on the Ascendancy because it would help clear speed and be great for bossing, but the shocks are just too good. So yeah, definitely get Breath of Lightning. It's really good. But yeah, that's pretty much just an update on what I've been doing this league. I do got to figure out my defenses really badly. I pretty much just have to get Nagus Aurora at this point. I can't see anything else to help sustain me more. Also, I am looking for a +1 to Socketed Gems Corrupted Brass Dome. I really want one, but I haven't seen it on the PoE trades at all. So if anyone has one, sell it to me. And I do plan to write all this out in like my forum post and update that when I finish this build, but can't really promise when that's going to be, as Uber bosses scare the pants off me. And obviously I gotta fix my defenses before I post anything. That's basically all I got for now though. Thank you all for watching, and good luck out there, Exiles.